Hi guys, so on Monday we heard that the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson needed to have some things explained to him more than once. He zoned out during important meetings and couldn't follow simple instructions or directions. But don't worry, whenever Boris Johnson is brought up, some headbanger is ready to defend him. This time it was Guto Harri, the Tories' former spin doctor. He once said that while Boris Johnson was wrong to have parties at number 10 during the pandemic, people should see the bigger picture. Yeah. Well, following the latest news about the former Prime Minister, Guto here tried to suggest that Boris Johnson is actually a very articulate individual, and he was facing unelected bureaucrats at the time. Pretty pathetic stuff. Have a listen.
Bamboozled by data.
I just don't recognise that at all. And I've run it past a number of people. He can get his head around just about everything. Whatever else you think of him, whatever you think of his policies, his decisions, the idea that this is not a highly intelligent, educated man who can get his head around a lot of things is ridiculous.
So why would Patrick Vallance be making it up then?
Well, I hesitate to say the arrogance of the unelected. I hesitate to say somebody who is looking at one tiny piece of the jigsaw, a big jigsaw, and a very important piece of the jigsaw.
He was in those meetings with him, wasn't he?
But he was there as somebody who understood modelling of what a virus in an unprecedented situation might do in the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister has got to, A, answer to the electorate, B, pick up the pieces today where we spend 400 billion locking down with all the consequences that we've touched upon tonight. There are much bigger considerations that he had to think about, and he had to weigh up lives as well as livelihoods, as well as legacy, as well as everything else. So to turn up as the expert witness and then just sort of slag off everybody else because they don't just agree with your narrow piece of the jigsaw is the only piece of the jigsaw. I'm sorry to sort of, I'm sure he's a brilliant scientist, worked with him last year, but he's not looking at the big picture. And the idea that Boris is not capable of understanding science is ludicrous.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so first of all, I have to respond to the first point that he raised about the arrogance of the unelected. The arrogance of the unelected. The guy who we're talking about, Sir Patrick Vallance, his job was to provide advice to the government. He was paid to provide expert advice to the government. Now, it was up to the government whether they wanted to follow that advice or not. And what we've seen in some of the comments was an observation of Boris Johnson. Now, most reasonable people, when they read that, were not surprised by it. You don't actually have to interact with Boris Johnson directly to understand the sort of things that he would say and do, because he has demonstrated it in the past. He's not an articulate individual. He's not a deeply intelligent man. Because how could he turn around and say, well, he didn't know he was attending a party, or he didn't know whether he was following the rules, or he didn't know what the rules were? Either he's an idiot or he's lying, it's not mutually exclusive. It's also possible that Boris Johnson's not all that clever. Now, I don't think he's stupid. He's ruthless. He's very good at dealing with his enemies. He's very good at manipulating people, including the public and politicians. But we saw the evidence there presented by Sir Patrick Vallance. Johnson was not able to follow meetings. Johnson had to have things explained to him more than once. He couldn't understand simple concepts. Now, you could try and suggest that, well, he was thinking about other things. He was focusing on the public or his legacy. Who gives a flying F about Boris Johnson's legacy? Why the hell was Boris Johnson caring about his legacy in the middle of a bloody pandemic? The EU at the time, this was also during the negotiations, the Brexit negotiations, the EU had offered Boris Johnson and his administration a pause. Let's talk about Brexit. Let's continue these negotiations after the pandemic. An intelligent person would say, yes, let's do that. Boris Johnson and his administration said, no, we want to focus on Brexit. We want to invest in Brexit. We don't care about... The pandemic will come second. He was advised to go into lockdowns, to extend lockdowns, and he ignored that advice. Is that an intelligent person? You know, when you're told by an expert you should do X and you don't do it. Now you can say, well, he had to do it because he had to care about the economy and he had to care about his legacy and the constituents. Boris Johnson didn't care about the economy. We know what Boris Johnson said about the economy, about business. Why would he have campaigned for Brexit if he cared about the economy? Why would he have lied to the people of Northern Ireland, lied to the public if he cared about the public, about voters? So Boris Johnson only cared about himself. He was thrust into this situation. He didn't know what to do, but the arrogance that he learned in Eton convinced him that he doesn't need to listen to experts, that he needs to listen to himself. And that the rest is history. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.